Comes Rashi in the beginning of the parsha and tells us that when it says Kisikna Evet Ivri, it means Ivri literally. Oh, wow. Why does Rashi have to tell us that? And Rashi says you would have thought it's a Knani. Come to tell you, no, it's an Ivri. Why would you have thought it's a Knani? And that's really at the heart of the Rebbe Sikha. And the Rebbe comes and explains in his base that we know that the Yidden left Mitzias Mitzrayim, they were extremely wealthy. So much so that Moshe had to force them after Kriyas Yamsuf to move. You see on Baal Karcham, which is another Sikha of the Rebbe, because they had so much good stuff. Comes interesting in our 18 star, the Rebbe says that I'm sure that there was no Evet Ivris once the Yidden left Mitzrayim, but in Mitzrayim, when they were Mitzrayim, the Chazal say that there was Evet Ivris. The Jews, some Jews enslaved other Jews. But by Yetzias Mitzrayim, we're told everybody was sent out and released, and even if not, they could have bought themselves freedom with all the money they had that they took from Mitzrayim while they were still in Egypt, which is an interesting note. So then how is it possible that there should be an Evet Ivri in Yetzias Mitzrayim? Everyone had money, so nobody had to steal. And even if the guy who stole because of Loisach Moidi was jealous, he could have paid back whatever debt he had 5 times over. So why would anyone be an Evet Ivri? And the issue then is, why then, if it's an Evet Ivri, and Evet Ivri doesn't happen at this time, why then would Eila Mishpatim be the first mitzvahs that we hear after Matan Torah, and the first ones in Parshat Mishpatim? Why would this be the mitzvah if it's something that does not happen? Kisik, that's going to happen in the future. Comes the Rebbe, and that's where he really says in the Ois Hey that that's the question that at the heart of the Sikha. The question of the Sikha is like, why is Taka this the first mitzvah after? Now that we know that, we would have thought it's Evet Knani because it's relevant for the time, but we have to tell us it's Evet Ivri because that's what the pasuk says. And Evet Knani, you have to work forever. Evet Ivri only 6 years, so why Taka is this the first? And that's where the Rebbe's, the big insight, at least for me, in the Sikha is in Eizvav. Because later on, what did Rashi say? That what's the reason that you have to pierce the ear of the Evet that does not want to get released after 6 years? Because Oizen Zushashama, this ear that heard, Leisigna, if I went and stole. And if he sells himself, then this is the ear that heard, Ki Libin Yisrael Avadim, that the Yidden are slaves of Hashem, and this person sold himself. Says the Rebbe that this is one unique mitzvah where the consequence and the action, you can clearly see the correlation. Often there's a consequence. A person has to get malchus, a person gets knas, but you don't see the direct correlation between the act and how it affects this world and the consequence the person gets. Over here, you do see the consequence. You see that the Ratzas Ozna, he gets a hole in the land. Comes the Rebbe and says, when does the person, a hole in the air. When does the person get the hole in the air? After 6 years. But this is 6 years after he sold himself into slavery, or after he managed to steal. Comes the Rebbe and says, from here you see that the truth is that even though they only get the piercing after 6 years, it's for what happened 6 years ago. It's for the fact, that's the Chiddush the Rebbe says, the piercing is not for the fact that now you say you want to stay a slave. No, it's the mere fact that Oizen Jew Shashama. How did you sell yourself into slavery? How did you steal? So over here, there's a strong connection between the two. Comes the Rebbe and says in Oisches, because we know that the whole point of Matan Torah, and it's the previous Sikha as well, is to make a bir v'zikoch to refine this world. So what's the first mitzvah of Mishpatim that we see? Something that penetrates this world. That you see that it gets pierced in the ear, and that the Torah expects it in real life that you heard Kilib and Yisrael Avadim. That means literally don't become a slave. And the Rebbe refers to what it says in the Teres Chaim, which is the Maimarim of the Mittler Rebbe, and Dirah Chaim, also from the Mittler Rebbe, and Sefer Tzemach Tzedek, that explains 3 levels of Nefesh Adam. Serving. There's Evet Knaini, where you're still a Knaini. In other words, that the Yetzer Hara is still very strong. It's still a Knaini, but there's an Evet. You do Kabbalah Cell, you don't give yourself in. Then there's an Evet Ivri, where the Nefesh Elokis is shining, but nevertheless it hasn't been transformed. So you're still an Evet. Then there's the Amma Ivriya, Amma, female Neshama Daban, which is a Makabel. In other words, that they've given themselves totally over to desire, that they're total Makabel to the Ivri, to the Neshama. And at this stage of the Sikha, we're talking, in this stage of the Parsha, we're talking about the Evet Ivri, which is the beginning of the Avodah, which is to transform the Nefesh HaBahamis. Only then, later on, you reach the level of Amma Ivriya. So what's sitting at the heart of the Sikha? What's sitting at the heart of the Sikha is this idea of the unique relationship between this consequence and this action of the Evet Ivri, the fact that it's happening because they stole or sold themselves, and that in a real way we see that the consequence is something in their life, and that's why it's the first Sikha, it's the first Rashi, and the idea of being an Evet Ivri Beruchnius.